start today's webinar on the Bhagavat Purana with our special guest, Dr. Adluri. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today from around the world. It is always a pleasure to be hosting these. My name is Ankur Patel, the Director of Advancement for Hindu University of America. And we'll jump straight into it. So, the Bhagavat Purana, right? The Srimad Bhagavat Purana is one of 18 Mahapuranas of the Hindu textual tradition. It is a highly polished Vaishnava work insuperable in its appeal to theologians, philosophers, and connoisseurs of literature. Like the Upanishads and the Mahabharata, the Bhagavat Purana presents Vishnu, especially in the form of Krishna as Brahman. While remaining faithful to the Vedic revelation, the Purana also remains open to a variety of interpretations, non-dualism, dualism, qualified non-dualism, and a couple others. All these are synthesized according to Bhakti. And besides the Sri Vaishnava and Gaudiya traditions, numerous commentators and teachers consider this Purana to be the principal scripture of their theology and practice. So in today's webinar, Dr. Vishnu Adluri, one of our core faculty at Hindu University of America, will introduce his graduate course on this great Mahapurana. He'll explore the place of this text within the Vedic Itas Purana textual tradition, understand its narrative architecture, philosophical foundations, its monumental bhakti project, and its contribution to aesthetics. Thank you for joining us today, everyone, and especially to Dr. Vishnu Adluri from New Jersey. Vishwaji, maybe I'll give you an introduction and I'll hand it over to you. That sound good?
Sure.
Yes. So Dr. Vishnu Adluri is a professor in the philosophy department at Hunter College in New York. He holds PhDs in philosophy from the New School for Social Research in New York, Indology from the Phillips University in Marburg, and Sanskrit. He has a PhD in Sanskrit from Deccan College in Pune. Professor Adluri's work focuses on the reception of ancient Greek and Indian thought in modernity. He is the author of 3 monographs, 4 edited volumes, numerous articles and essays, and we are glad to have him at Hindu University of America teaching in our graduate division program. I'll leave it at that, and I will hand it to Dr. Adluri to present today's webinar.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much, Ankur, for the generous introduction. I welcome all of you. Thank you for joining in. Now that both the Purana and I have been introduced by Ankur so well, we should not waste too much time and get to the webinar itself. I am not very good at extemporating and just speaking, so I always prepare a PowerPoint. I would like to share that with you. Please feel free to ask any questions if you need me to slow down, or if you have any questions, clarifications as we go along. You can type them in the chat and Ankur will interrupt me. Or if the question can wait until the discussion period afterwards, that would be fine as well. So here's the presentation. Can you all see this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. So we will go through a few topics in this. We'll begin with a prayer. We'll, of course, conclude with a prayer. As Ankur pointed out, we're interested in the place of the Bhagavata Purana in the Hindu textual tradition. And whether the Purana represents continuity, development, or diversity in Hinduism, features of the Purana, and special features of the Bhagavata Purana as opposed to other Puranas, 18 Mahapuranas. So the prayer, why don't I just read this in English and then read it in Sanskrit so that it'll be more useful. He from whom the creation, sustenance, and dissolution of the universe takes place, who is both the material and the instrumental cause of the universe, who is omniscient, who is the only one having self-mastery, being the one independent entity, who illumined the mind of Brahma with the Vedic revelation, whose wisdom is a wonder of even the greatest of sages. He in whom the worlds, the manifestations of the three gunas, subsist in reality without in the least affecting him, just as the combination of material elements like fire, water, and earth subsist in their causes without changing their elemental nature, in whose light of consciousness there is no place for anything false. On that truth supreme we meditate. So if any one of you knows this, you may chant it along. Om Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditarataschaarteshvabhignasvarat tene brahma hridaya adikavaye yanti yasuraya tejo varimridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So what is the place of the Bhagavata Purana in the Hindu textual tradition? For the last 100 years, at least, we have been hearing from academics that there is no such thing as Hinduism. It is a bunch of very many different texts and different practices, different sects and different philosophies. They call themselves, Hindus call themselves Vedic, but how many Hindus today know the Vedas? Do they know the Brahmanas? Do they know the Atharva, etc.? So there is a lot of confusion that has been created on the academic side, either willingly or through ignorance. But for the Hindu practitioner, there is no such confusion. No Vaishnava is confused about Shaivism being also Brahmavada or a manifestation of Brahman. No Purana dismisses, ignores, or denies the existence of other deities. There are questions about whether Hinduism is a monotheism or a polytheism or a monism or just ritual practices of various kinds. So in such an atmosphere, simply having to say that there is a Hindu textual tradition is quite daring, but quite appropriate. And in this very rigorous textual tradition that has been transmitted quite faithfully through manuscripts among a learned connoisseur custodians, the Bhagavata Purana is a shining jewel. So let us look at the traditional view and see if there is any sense to it. The tradition is quite clear, as we read in the prayer, that this Brahman, who is Satyam Param, has Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye. So he has given the Veda to the Adikavi Brahma in his heart. So this is the essence of revelation. That revelation is like the breath of, or the Veda is like the breath of Brahman, which inspires the creator Brahma to create. That Veda which Brahma got is not available to us, or if it was available in a different form. Veda Vyasa divides the Veda in in 4 groups according to Chandas. So all the rigs he collected in the Rig Veda, those rigs that were chanted were collected in the Sama Veda, and etc. So you get the idea. But Vyasa did not stop there. As soon as he divided or edited the Vedas, he composed the Mahabharata as the Panchama Veda, or the 5th Veda. So the Mahabharata is also considered a Veda. Vyasa does not stop there. He composes the 18 Mahapuranas. And with the Mahapuranas, the revelation of Hinduism comes to a close. The canon is sealed. So from the beginning of the canon, which is the division of the Veda, to the end of the canon, which is the Mahapuranas, at the end of the Itihasa Purana tradition, Vyasa is the name that stands over the textual tradition. So the Hindu textual tradition has only one name, Vyasa. So it is absurd to think that Hinduism consists of, many different diverse things. By Vyasa's name thus unifies the entire Hindu tradition. But the Bhagavata Purana has a way of writing itself into this tradition. The Bhagavata Purana was not directly composed by Vyasa with inspiration from Narayana or Vishnu, but Vishnu, the supreme being, teaches this to Brahma, and Brahma teaches it to Narada, and Narada gives it to Vyasa, or gives the kernel of it to Vyasa. This kernel is called Chatushloki, 4 verses. And Vyasa, of course, composes the Bhagavata Purana. So the academic view is that we must read this text primarily historically, and it begins with a series of questions. For example, Vyasa cannot exist. How could one man have written the entire Itihasa Purana? Please note that assumed in this question is Vyasa was just an everyday guy like you and me. Of course, you and I can't do it, but that does not mean someone else cannot do it. And if you, for example, looked at Isaac Asimov, he published books under every category of the librarian's Dewey system of classification. So the question is a little contains in itself a kind of a very common sense prejudice. So the academics consider that all our texts are anonymous literature. They have not said anything by anonymous. It just, the word anonymous means nameless. We don't know the name of the author, but they take one illegitimate step from calling it anonymous literature. They aver, or they insist, that they have no specific authors at all, that these texts are accumulations of myths and legends over a period of time, sort of like a basket in which so many things are collected. And they do say that originally Hinduism was Vedic, but the Purana literature is later, and it belongs no longer to the high Vedic Aryan Hindus, but to ordinary people, and it promulgates blind faith among the less literate. They also may consider that Veda is a revelation, but these later texts are just stories that are made up to bring high thoughts to simple-minded people. So this is the kind of prejudice we are operating with. But why must we read the text historically? If you look behind the scenes, why this rise of history? we get some interesting insights. The historical method arose as a part of the history of Christianity. Jewish prophecy, especially by the prophets of the Old Testament, the Christians believe, was fulfilled historically in the coming of the Christ as Messiah. So there is one historical event in Christianity which is the ultimate truth for Christians. Therefore, historical truth becomes ultimate truth. Now, this may be so for Christianity, but it is not so for either Hindus or Buddhists or even Jews or even Muslims. So in academia, a Christian prejudice persists as if it were a universal condition. And so all the texts of all traditions are now read historically. Third point, during colonial times, Indians were told that Europeans were superior not only in technology, but also in humanities. They said that their method was superior because they applied the historical method. Indians should do the same if they want to be progressive. So places like Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute and so on immediately began to adopt the historical method, and the academics and intellectuals of India for large part, even to this day, pretend or at least assert that only historical readings of these texts are scientific. We were further told that we must go from myth to history if we want to go from tradition to modernity, and therefore traditional commentators were set aside. You know, the Bhagavata Purana has many, many, many commentators. Bhagavad Gita has many commentators. Even the Mahabharata has commentators. Our tradition is a commentarial tradition, and this tradition suffered a brief gap because of the arrival of modernity from the European brand of modernity. So we don't have to read the texts historically, but can we read the Purana historically even? Let me first say that anyone can do anything. Moreover, they can publish it, post it, retweet it. You know, you can say anything you want to say about any text. For example, I heard somebody say the word Rama is reminiscent of Ramses, so of Egypt. So Rama must be Ramses, or Ramses must be Rama. These kinds of things, these pseudo-historical or historical things, speculations, anybody can do, but that's not recommended. The historical method replaces an entire tradition of sophisticated thinkers and poets with common sense speculations. So there is a bleeding on value if you read the text historically. Now, the question of time, kala, is presented in the Itihasa Purana in a highly complex way. For the Hindus, there's no such thing as there were 7 days in the beginning, and God created everything on 6 days. Seventh day he rested, and then the world, then Adam ate the apple, then there was a great fall, and Christ saves us. And when the apocalypse happens, history is closed off. So this simple linear version of time is not something that even these texts are working with. Their vision goes into cyclical time of kalpas, yugas, pralayas, ever new shrishtis, and so on. So reducing this complex notion of time in its multidimensional quality to a linear, simple time of a beginning with the fall middle with Christ, and end with apocalypse is just too simplistic for reading these texts. Again, this is extremely important for Christians, and I do not mean to take away or criticize them in any way, but that temporality, when it is transferred to the study of Hindu texts, becomes a bit ridiculous. Four, the immortal soul for Hindus, the jiva, persists every pralaya, even if you take the apocalypse as one pralaya. So what is gained by ignoring the main thing, moksha, and exchanging it for some BC or AD dates? Okay. So the subject matter of the Purana is Brahman, and Brahman is Nitya, eternal, Shuddha, unchanging, without parts, Buddha, ever conscious. The matters of history are material, but the subject matter for Hindus is nothing material. It is pure consciousness. Therefore, you can read the Puranas historically, but it is a very silly way to read them. What approach will we take? So the Veda was divided and interpreted by whatever you want to call Vyasa literature, which begins with the Mahabharata and reaches a climax in the Bhagavata Purana. The texts of Hinduism are the Vyasa interpretations of the Veda. In them, revelation continues to live and become a part of our everyday life. So it is not as if the Hindu has said goodbye to Veda, but that Veda was interpreted in a very specific way in the Itihasa Purana, and therefore, whenever we read the Bhagavata or the Mahabharata or Shiva Purana or Skanda Purana, we are not just reading the Veda, but we are reading the Veda with Vyasa's interpretation of it. Even if you do not consider Vyasa as a single person, Vyasa forms a perspective that has guided the textual tradition of the Hindus quite consistently and rigorously. So what is a Purana? Every Purana contains 10 topics. They're called Dasha Lakshanas. These Dasha Lakshanas are listed in Bhagavata Purana 12, Skanda, chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. O Brahmana, authorities on the matter understand a Purana to contain 10 characteristic topics. So I have that list here. These 10 topics are Sarga, or primary creation, which is the evolution of Prakriti into the gunas. Then next is the Visarga, or secondary creation, where the tattvas for the manifestation of karmas of jivas is created. Vritti, or sthana, is the residence and support, the means of livelihood, and the functioning of all beings. This is the next thing that the Purana talks about. Raksha, or protection of these beings, is done through the dharma samsthapana, or the persistent re-establishment of order, dharma, which is achieved through the Lord's incarnations. Manvantara, or epoch, is the beginning of a manvantara. Oh, there are 14 manvantaras in each kalpa. Each one has its own Manu. Manu of our time is called Manu Swayambhuva, and his history, Manu Swayambhuva's history, is given in the Bhagavata. Then there is Vamsha, or descent from Brahma, Prajapatis, and Vedras, and this would go through all the Prajapatis like Uttanapada and so on. all these ancestors are described in Vamsha. Vamshanucharita consists of the deeds of important kings, but it is not just history. It has elements of, or it is very complex. It has to deal with, for example, Bhagavatarana. So the history of the Kurus, Pandavas, Panchalas is not just the history of these kings, but it is also, there is a Deva Rahasya, which is the secret of the gods, which consists in Bharavatarana, or unburdening the earth. So the Devasura Yuddha and so on are the more hidden but important features of Vamshanucharita. Topic number 8 is samstha or pralaya or cosmic dissolution, partial cosmic dissolution where everything just goes into a subtle state and reemerges, or it could be a more complete destruction at the end of the life cycle of Brahma. Then the 9th is hetu or purpose, which shows what is the purpose of these texts. It is to show the root cause of this universe, which is avidya and the workings of karma, which cause us to turn away from Krishna Vasudeva and therefore enter dukkha. The 10th topic is apashraya or ultimate support, which is Brahman, taking refuge in him. All the other 9 Puranic functions are fulfilled and our jiva reaches its source. So the Purana is not just a collection of stories thrown together randomly. The stories themselves become popular, and we like to talk about, oh, this story appears in the Matsya Purana, that story appears in the Kurma Purana. But if you read the Purana itself from beginning to end, it is very carefully articulated along these topics. Now, if you look at these topics, it is clear that the apashraya or Brahman could be conceived either as Vishnu or as Shiva or as Devi in the Shakta Puranas. So the overall structure of a Purana, the template of the Purana is philosophical and non-sectarian. And this is what we might call Vyasa's interpretive repurposing of the Veda. But according to the Purana, you can have any sectarian god in its place, in the place of Brahman. In the Bhagavata Purana, it is Vishnu Narayana. So those were the general features of the Puranas. Now, what are the special features of the Bhagavata Purana? One of the main teachings of the Bhagavata Purana, and I'll come to this point towards the end of the presentation, bhakti is the supreme goal of life, transcending even moksha. So, according to the Mahabharata, there are 4 purusharthas or goals for a well-lived, successful human life. These are dharma, artha or material prosperity, kama, enjoying pleasurable things in this life that are predetermined by dharma. So within the limits of dharma, enjoyment, and finally moksha. But according to the Bhagavata Purana, bhakti is a great thing in and of itself. It transcends even moksha. It fills you with rapture here and now. And bhakti is so amazing that even those who get moksha come back like Shuka just to sing the glories of Krishna Vasudeva. So that is one feature of the Bhagavata Purana. The second is Brahman is Saguna and Nirguna. So when Krishna Vasudeva appears, Brahma does penance to Brahma sings a hymn. In that hymn, he praises him as if he were Nirguna. And whenever you talk about Nirguna Brahman Satchitananda, is equated with Krishna Vasudeva. So the mystery of Brahman, whether he's Saguna or Nirguna, is balanced so beautifully by the Bhagavata Purana that you can read it a million times and you will never be able to say Nirguna is higher or Saguna is higher. Because Saguna is Nirguna, Nirguna is Saguna, according to Bhagavata Purana. In other words, if I want to ask, what is the ultimate reality? What? Using a neuter word, what? Then I will get the answer Nirguna Brahman. Who is this Brahman? Then I will get the answer Saguna Brahman. So what and who are so beautifully balanced in the Bhagavata Purana, nowhere else. Everywhere else, except in the Gita, the one easily slips and goes in the direction of Saguna or goes in the direction of Nirguna. Saguna Brahman is Vishnu Nar. About Nirguna Brahman, there are no stories, no katha, no akhyana, no narrative is possible. So naturally, the Puranas focus on the description of Saguna Brahman while constantly reminding us that Saguna is also Nirguna. So Vishnu, he has many, many avatars. They're all described in the Bhagavata Purana very briefly, but especially beginning with Varaha. But the main avatara is, of course, Krishna Vasudeva. And the Bhagavata says, after describing listing the avatars, Bhagavata simply says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is Bhagavan himself. You might have heard of Narayaniyam by Melpatur. Bhattatiri, he wrote something called Narayaniya in the first Dashaka that he wrote. It is a summary of the whole Bhagavata in 10 chapters containing 10 verses each. So, sorry, 100 chapters containing 10 verses each. So in the first Dashaka, he says that Bhagavat Shabda Mukhyam means the term Bhagavan is applicable primarily to Krishna Vasudeva. Another way of underscoring Krishna Vasudeva in the Bhagavata Purana is by saying that all other avatars are partial incarnations, but Krishna is a Purna avatara. He is the complete manifestation of Brahman. So Bhagavata Purana, it is the highest philosophy because it contains, as Ankur told you, all types of Vedanta in a systematic harmony presented with the highest literary skill to bring the bliss of Brahman into every chapter. So every little episode contains literary skill to the highest degree. And what is brilliant about the Bhagavata Purana is it's not just that the poets are filled with bhakti and are just composing in a literary manner. They're self-conscious of their own literary genius, and they know the power of language and how to use language to communicate not only satyam, but also bhava and rasa. So while reading, just the words of the text give us the joy equivalent to communion with Krishna. This is not a small order. Anybody trying to do this will go horribly bad and will look pretentious. But the Bhagavata is filled with such essence that spending time with Bhagavata Purana is like spending time with Krishna Vasudeva. Therefore, it is the best use of human time to read the Bhagavata Purana. Is the text aware that reading this text is the best use of human time? Of course it is. Because Raja Parikshit is cursed to be killed by the serpent Takshaka. Raja Parikshit is the son of Abhimanyu, and Abhimanyu is the son of Arjuna. So the grandson of Arjuna is cursed to die by Takshaka. And so he does not know what to do for those 7 days. And he spends those 7 days listening to the Bhagavata Purana. That is why you have Bhagavata Saptahas of the 7 days of listening to the Bhagavata tradition. So the text structures into itself its importance and how it is to be incorporated into our lives, not only in terms of it being the best use of human time, but while alive and living for a long time, you still read the Bhagavata in units of 7 communally, but you can read it for swadhyaya or personal study every day. Raja Parikshit is presented in the beginning and end of the epic. Raja Parikshit appears at the advent of Kali Yuga. This is an important scene in the Bhagavata. This is Kali Purusha here, and Kali Purusha resides in drinking, gambling, and other vices. And Parikshit is upset with Kali Purusha because Kali Purusha is harming this bull. This is the Dharma bull. And Dharma, he has cut off 3 of Dharma's legs. So Dharma stands on only 1 foot in Kali Yuga. But in his death, he accomplishes the best thing possible for Kali Yuga, which is he gets and gives us the narrative of the Bhagavata Purana. So even though we live in the worst of the times, we are living in the best of possible ways of any yuga, thanks to the Bhagavata. So Shukadeva comes and teaches Raja Parikshit this Bhagavata Purana, and that is the frame narrative of this Bhagavata Purana. Now, one strange thing is that after, let's go back. After he listens to it, his jiva goes to Vishnu, but Krishna, but the snake anyway consumes the body, Takshaka. So his son Janamejaya, who is the great grandson of Arjuna, will conduct a sacrifice called Sarpasatra to avenge his father's death by Takshaka. In that sacrifice, Vyasa comes and tells his student Vaishampayana to narrate the Mahabharata for the first time. So if you see this, in a way, the Bhagavata is saying the Mahabharata came earlier, and Narada came and told Vyasa, now that you've written the Mahabharata, you should write the Bhagavata Purana. But if you think in terms of chronological natural time, the Bhagavata Purana should have happened already here before even Parikshit dies, and the Mahabharata happens after Parikshit dies. So you see the close intertwining of the textual tradition. It it has many strands, but these are braided together in such a ornate and perfect way that just pulling a text out and saying, what is the date of this text, makes no sense whatsoever. So by doing this, notice that Vyasa did the Veda and Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata, but in a way, the Bhagavata Purana must have happened between the Veda and the Mahabharata, between the Veda and the Panchama Veda. So you see how the Bhagavata Purana has inserted itself into the textual tradition that is unfolding. Earlier and later have no meaning anymore here when we talk about Krishna Vasudeva. Now I want to go over a few quotes so that you get a flavor of what the text itself is. It is okay, what it sounds like. It is this Veda, re-edited and divided by the good and kind-hearted Vyasa, that men have somehow managed to preserve among them. So the fourfold Veda was designed for our Kali Yuga. Women, Shudras, and degenerate men of the twice-born Varnas, Trayina Shruti Gocharam. These three have no right to hear the Vedas. Why? Because they are not keeping ritual purity. So specifically for the benefit of these women, Shudras, and degenerate men who have no right to hear the Vedas, who are debarred from Vedic rites, the sage Vyasa, out of pity for them, composed the Itihasa known as Mahabharata. So the Vedas specifically for women and Shudras and other people who do not practice ritual purity related to Vedic karmas. For them, this is the social justice Veda. Bhagavata Purana is the social justice Veda. It is meant for everybody, especially the underprivileged. So that is why not after he writes Mahabharata, Narada comes and scolds Vyasa and says, you have not adequately described the unsullied glory of the Supreme Lord. I consider as imperfect all those philosophies which fail to please the Lord because of their lack of devotional exuberance, which alone can give full satisfaction to the Supreme Lord. It also gives full satisfaction to the jivas. You have not expounded, O Vyasa, you have not expounded the greatness of Vasudeva with that exhaustiveness with which you have treated the Vedic rituals and the four Purusharthas. Works of pure literary artistry that nowhere describe the sanctifying glory of the Lord are eschewed by the holy spiritual swans, Paramahamsas, who are ever accustomed to sport in the Manasa lake of Sachitananda alone. They discard such compositions, considering them only as dirty mud puddles fit for the bath of crows. Literary compositions, which are characterized by the presence of words indicating divine attributes and glory, destroy the sins and evil tendencies of people, even if there are mistakes in every one of their lines. Holy men hear the exposition of such texts and themselves expound and sing them. So the Mahabharata is extremely aware of itself as a literary masterpiece, and that literary masterpiece has to have certain sanctifying features. They have to be akin to the Manasa lake of Sachitananda. So with that, I just wanted to close this out by saying that this is the course I am teaching. We will be reading the Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 volumes by Swami Tapasyananda. The Purana is not very, very big. it is only 18,000 verses compared to the 100,000 verses of the Mahabharata. So less than a fifth of the Mahabharata. So if you want to take the course, here's the course number, and I'm sure Ankur will tell you. But there is a concluding prayer I'd like to do before I take questions. Again, let's read the Sanskrit and then let's read the translation and then the Sanskrit. Salutations to that supreme deity, whom celestials like Brahma, Varuna, Indra, Rudra, Maruts, and others extol with sacred praises and prayers, whom expert Sama chanters hymn with the help of Vedas, Vedanga, Pada, Krama, and the Upanishads, whom yogis see in their minds that have become steady and fixed on him, and whose extent and prowess are beyond the understanding of the hosts of Devas and Asuras. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutah Stunvanti Devyaistavai Vedai Sangha Padakramopanishadai Gayanti Yam Samaga Dhyanavastita tadgatena manasa pashyanti yam yogino yasyantam na vidhu sura suragana devaya tasmai namaha. Okay.
I always learn so much with you, Vishwaji. Great presentation, really gave background. And of course, you're going to go in a deeper dive in the course. Let me drop the details right there in the chat. You can click that. It's going to be on Saturdays, 10 a.m. It is a graduate level course. It is going to be a lot heavier than this webinar, even though there was so much covered here. So we have almost 100 people with us still. Thank you for being with us today for this wonderful presentation by Dr. Adluri. We have a couple questions in the chat. Also, if you put them in the Q&A box, it'll just be easier to follow those up. Indus University, wonder if you're representing or if you can type your name out. Are there more instances where the Mahabharata episodes are connected to the Bhagavat Purana, like we find the complete story of Shishupala's Moksha's interpretation from Bhagavata? And they're asking if you could mention more such episodes and interpretations if possible.
Yeah, so the text itself begins with Ashwatthama killing Parikshit in the womb with the Brahma weapon. So yes, so throughout the Mahabharata, throughout the Bhagavata Purana, constant references are made to the Mahabharata. For example, the killing of Jarasandha and Krishna giving the Gita, although that is very brief. The Rajasuya sacrifice, obviously, where Shishupala is killed, and so on. So throughout the Bhagavata Purana, it maintains itself as a commentary of, or let us say, an update of the Mahabharata, updated from the point of view of Krishna Bhakti.
Great. Thank you, Raja Bhishekji, for joining us from Indus University. Chandrakanji, nice kind of broader question. What is textual tradition? Right? Hindu University of America has a whole area of study called texts and traditions. So Vishwaji, please explain.
So Hinduism appears as if it is just satsangs and discourses and practices such as going to temples and so on. And we do not understand that even the temples are constructed according to very carefully preserved texts called the Agamas. So the Hindu tradition may appear ritual and full of bhakti and experience, but it is undergirded by a very carefully curated set of texts. So, for example, the Vedas are divided in a way that they conclude with the Vedanta texts or the Upanishads. Then the Upanishads have sentences that appear contradictory, so they are called up into the Brahma Sutras. And the Mahabharata itself is an interpretation of what are the consequences of following karma, what are the consequences of following jnana. The kernel of that is in the Gita. And then the Bhagavata Purana now comments again on the Mahabharata. So you see how this is going. And it's not just going linearly, it's braided again with great acharyas like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, and so on, Vallabha, Nimbarka. So it is enriched, but there is such a thing as a textual tradition. And to get a grip on understanding Hinduism, you have to know the connections between those texts. You have to see those texts in a certain sequence.
Great, great. And where does the Ramayana fit in the sequence of textual traditions?
Everywhere, because the Rama story is presented in a very brief but a very beautiful form in the Mahabharata, in the Vana Parvan. It is called Ramopakhyanā, and it is also present in the Bhagavata Purana. So Valmiki glorifies that avatar in Ramayana. So it's part of the textual tradition. It is together with Harivamsha, which is a Khila of Mahabharata, and Valmiki's Ramayana. This constitutes the Itihasa portion of the Itihasa Purana. So that is where I would place it.
Great. Any other translations you would recommend? Sophia from Brazil, thank you for joining, other than the one by Swami Tapasyananda.
Well, there is a complete translation of the 10th skanda by Edwin Bryant. It is called The Beautiful Legend. And then he took sections from the other skandhas and he put it together in a book called Bhakti Yoga, which is pretty good. There is the Swami Prabhupada translation, which is available online. It is a wonderful research tool. And one must not think that the ISKCON tradition is some kind of a very modern heretical tradition. It comes in the parampara of the Bhagavata, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Gaudiya tradition is one of the most beautiful expositions of the Bhagavatam. So there is also the Prabhupada Srimad Bhagavatam text.
Okay. Jayashriji is asking, why are women clubbed with Shudras and degenerate people?
Because in Vedic times, Vedic rituals consisted of more or less a full-time job. So you would get up in the morning, you would do all the rituals. You have to have a cow in front of your house. You have to do the Agnihotra. You have to do all the Sandhyas. You have to do Darsha Purnamasa rituals and so on. So only the head of the house would do all these things, and therefore he would be in a state of ritual purity, but the women and the children who have not been initiated would not. So in that sense, women are not. But today, there is no such thing. Nobody has a cow tied in front of their house today, and they're doing the Agni Chayanas and all. So all of us are Dvija Bandhus, or we are, even if we are Brahmins, Brahmins in name only. Even if we are by gender male, we are in name only. What is essential is that we are all in a state of ritual purity from the perspective of Vedic Karma Kanda, because if you do not do the obligatory rituals, then you are just not in a state of purity. It's not like I don't do it, so I don't get punya. No, if you don't do it, you get the papa that is associated with it. So in such a situation in Kali Yuga, we have this Veda for all of us.
In the second half of
And the second point is that women are actually have played a very active role in the Itihasa Purana tradition. So in the Itihasa Purana tradition, basically Vyasa sort of hands over the the teaching part of it to women through these stories that mothers and grandmothers tell their children and so on. And so women become very important. I mean, today this Itihasa Purana tradition would be in a sorry state if the women did not continually tell their grandchildren these stories as they grew up.
And the second half of Jayashrie's question is kind of simple, but also pointed. Are women considered inferior at birth? Is there any in the text, and how does that play out? Obviously modern interpretation is different in how we approach now. And
Yeah. I would just say two things. One, in society, everybody is trying to seize power, right? So if the men try to seize power, the women, if they can, will seize power, whatever. And now in America, we have all other kinds of, let's say, groups trying to seize for power. So that is a social reality. We'll put that aside. But from the textual perspective, Vyasa is expecting you to treat women with utmost respect. I mean, he spent his whole life trying to teach women and Shudras, right? So we should adopt the social justice and egalitarian perspective of Vyasa, which we have somehow not followed. So if we are in error, we are in error not because of our texts, we are in error for not following our texts heartily enough.
I'm having just a little glitch. Okay. Ishwarji, is any Samanvaya planned between Bhagavata and the three Acharyas, Bhashyas, as part of the
No,
course?
in this course, yes, you're welcome to contribute in that manner, but the samanvaya I'm trying to do is between the Mahabharata and show the connections to Bhagavata Purana because Mahabharata happens to be my most beloved text. So I'm trying to see how the Bhagavata is working with the Mahabharata primarily. But of course, there is samanvaya. Samanvaya is impossible to avoid because the Bhagavata contains out and out Upanishadic statements everywhere, right? So, for example, the whole plan of the primary creation, secondary creation, and all, they contain Sankhya and Yoga and Vedantic interpretations of Sankhya and Yoga. So the acharyas are there. What I will not do in the class is try to get into the fight between Nirguna and Saguna Brahmans, which happen to be the debates some later Advaitins and Vishishta Advaitins get into. That I think will be a distraction in this course.
Professor BK Kutiala is asking an interesting question. Is Vyasa a person or an institution? Right? Thinking about it more broadly and what he represented or what Vyasa represented.
I think Vyasa represents, I will just give the answer from Mahabharata's perspective. Mahabharata says Vyasa is none other than Narayana, who gives us this revelation as the Mahabharata. And so I would consider Vyasa to be the name of the continuing revelation, that light that unfolds throughout the Hindu tradition, that bearer of the Jnana Deepa is who I would call Vyasa, and that light can be enshrined in one person or many persons, right? So if you look at Hinduism, maybe only besides the acharyas, the main ones are only Yajnavalkya, Vyasa, and Yajnavalkya, Vyasa, and Shankara, and Brahman. I mean, there are very few people.
Balaji's asking for a beginner. Is there a sequence that you recommend in approaching texts? Mahabharata
I know that
first
this
or
is a
Bhagavad?
course on a graduate level, so I expect graduate level writing and work if you're taking this for the graduate credit. But if you just don't care about your grade and don't want a grade, you can still register. You will still gain a lot from this course. So I don't want to turn anyone away, and I do not want anyone to feel intimidated, because if I am not intimidated, I am intimidated by having to teach the Bhagavata because I probably can't do it full justice. You should not be intimidated to study it. And at some point in all of our lives, we have to read this text at least a few times before we die. So, you know, I don't want to bring up requirements too much, and prevent you from taking the course.
Mm-hmm. Sarav is asking, what is ritual purity and why does that not apply to women and Shudras? Is this colonial Western interpretation or is there a better way to coin this terminology or at least to represent it?
Would the answer I gave, is that sufficient, or do you want me to go further? Because I explained that the Vedas give you certain rituals that are obligatory, that are called nitya karmas, like Darsha Purnamasa, like Agnihotri, and so on, that have to be maintained. And if you do not maintain them, you slip from your ritual purity. So ritual purity is something that you have to fight every day for it. It's a kind of tapas. So those who don't do it are considered ritually impure. Now, the Western colonial thing comes in as follows. It takes this ritual purity thing and turns it into a social commentary, a commentary on people and anthropology, sociology. And there I think the Western colonial interpretations go astray, because then they no longer focus on what purity means. It just focuses on uh, class divisions and social organizations. And in all of those things, Vyasa is quite broad-minded. Vyasa wants Abhyudaya as well as Nishreyasa. Abhyudaya means that everybody should prosper in the country. In a country in which the Shudras suffer is not a good country, according to Vyasa in his Raja Dharma portion of the Mahabharata. The King's Council actually contains, there are 4 members, and one of them is a Shudra in the King's Council, Advisory Council. So I mean, you kind of like have all kinds of politics that are separate from the issue.
Mm-hmm. There are a few more questions. You've answered some of them as people were asking during your presentation and in your explanation. How are you feeling? Any closing thoughts, any questions you want to ask from the audience? If you have any other questions, now's the time to get them in. Yeah, Sophia's just, we'll send out some, maybe Vishwaji, if you have some articles or other things that you want to share. Sophia's asking for other places to follow up and get into things like Bhakti Marga and study and follow up on other
Yeah,
opportunities other than.
the book Bhakti Yoga by Edwin Bryant is a good book. So it's a good place to start. And Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is also a good place.
Oh, Vijayantiji is asking about just the timing, right? The placing of the desks, the text, the dating, and how, if you go to Wikipedia, it's saying the Bhagavad Purana maybe 1000, right? It's so, the timing is so, I don't know. Please talk about the timing, the dating, and how it's been muddled
It
and
is,
influenced. And
there are no dates actually available in Indian history that are very, very firm. There are the coins, there are some copper plates and so on. But when it comes to the textual tradition, dating is extremely difficult because the manuscripts were very perishable. So the manuscripts had to be copied. I mean, whole families dedicated their children and their children and their children to just copying these manuscripts. So, so dating becomes difficult for that reason. The second reason is that certain ideas go aside and then they reappear. And when they reappear, the original might be lost. So when a new text comes up, an older text on which this was based might become lost. So it might appear that the Bhagavata Purana is very late, but it might contain materials that are quite ancient. In fact, the Brahmavada it contains is very close to the Upanishadic thing. And as you saw, the way it has composed itself, the Bhagavata is trying to place itself antecedently to the Mahabharata while acknowledging that it is posterior to Mahabharata. So I would not worry about the dates at all. The only date we have to worry about is the 7 days of Parikshit's life, which means life is short, and we should read this text now. That's the only, now is all we got.
beautiful, nice. Right, the application of it to our daily lives
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. Which is what our tradition focused on anyway, right? Nobody cared about when it was written or so. This is definitely a post-colonial thing.
Great. Shashikanchi is asking for you to elaborate on Saguna and Nirguna, right? The difference, how does it relate to Bhakti? I know you touched on it, but maybe some of our less versed audience members could use your.
No, Saguna Brahman is Brahman as he's described in the Itihasa Puranas, Vishnu with his iconography, with his color, his dress, his abode, his qualities, and so on. So that would be Saguna Brahman. So there are 5, we say, depictions of deity that are authorized as Saguna Brahman. These would be Vishnu, Shiva, Shakti, or Devi, Surya, which is necessary because we do Gayatri, and the 5th is Ganapati or Ganesha. So these are accepted forms of Saguna Brahman. But in a way, Bhagavata Purana itself says that all the forms of the earth itself, the universe itself is the Virata Purusha or Saguna Brahman form. So the universe is also a Saguna Brahman. But for the purposes of meditation, Dhyana Vastita Tadgatena Manasa, that when Brahman is reached through dhyana by the very, very pure ones like Narada, that Brahman appears or reveals itself in these forms that the rishis have passed down in the scriptures. So that those are the forms that are most efficacious for us to focus on and to relate to and dedicate ourselves to.
Yeah, and thank you for dedicating yourself to this work. I know you've put yourself through it. You've written so much.
Thanks.
And you're prolific and it's amazing. And actually, you were just invited to speak at Gujarat University or University of Ahmedabad in Gujarat. So thank you for that invitation. Vedyasji, we'll see how we can partner in the future and get Dr. Adluri to continue to share and spread his message. Kind
Ankur,
of,
if you could put, I do not know if my chat messages reach everyone, if you could put my email address in my,
Yeah, I'll put
yeah,
your
it's
HOA email.
vishwa.adluri
Yeah,
at hua.edu.
put
If
that
any
in the
one
chat.
of you have any further questions, and before I leave, I might have made a mistake here or there. I'm not perfect, so I apologize for any mistakes, but I tried to give you what I thought I could give you as the
Yeah.
best.
And if you're still here, let me make sure this poll is right. And just let us know if you're interested in taking the course or interested in taking a program at HUA. I should have asked this earlier. We still have 80 people with us so far. Thank you for sticking with us and being a part of this webinar. Chandrakanchi is asking some specific evaluation questions about the graduate level course. Do you want to give some context about the course and what's expected in that? Or do we
Yeah,
want to take that? Yeah.
hold on. Let me share something.
Yes,
So
yes.
sharing. So this is the Bhagavata Purana course. I composed this image because it shows Yashoda pointing to the texts where Krishna has to perform his leelas. So the textual space of the Bhagavata Purana is a space in itself where the Lord manifests and where the bhaktas go to sport with the Lord. So that's the image. And this, I think, is what you read as the introduction. And the course content is to read the entire text in translation. That is the main thing. And we look at various questions such as what is going on the literary level, what is going on the intertextual level, philosophical level. Indian texts often have 3 or 4 levels: Adibhautika, Adidaivika, Adhyatmika, and Adiyajna. So those levels we will tease out. We will do Samanvaya definitely with Brahma Sutra and the Upanishads, but we will, and with the Mahabharata. We will take the help of acharyas wherever we can. But the only thing that is barred from this class is fights about which is higher, Nirguna or Saguna Brahman. I am not even qualified to answer that question. And the Bhagavata definitely forbids you to get your mind in that direction. So that is the overall approach of the course. We will meet 3 hours every week, Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you will have to write a 12-page paper and make a presentation in class if you're taking it for credit. Does
Great.
that answer your question, Chandrakanji? If you have more questions, you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing your email. I have put in the chat. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Dr. Adluri, always a pleasure. I'm going to take one of your courses soon as well. And please, everyone, this isn't just supporting Hindu University of America. This is an opportunity for us to restore, recover, and steward our Hindu heritage or Dharma, this knowledge, and apply it to our modern lives. So it's an opportunity for us to engage and elevate and better ourselves. So it's not just Hindu University of America that we're asking you to support. This is an overall initiative that we're appreciates and is growing momentum because of folks like Dr. Adluri and you all joining us today on this webinar and hopefully taking a course, maybe joining us at least on webinars in the future and participating with other HUA initiatives like the Friends of HUA initiative that we're also running. So if you're going to participate, please, you can also email me. I think you get a lot of emails from me already, but one more wouldn't hurt. Anyway, thank you. Dhanyavad. Namaste, everyone. Vishwaji, any closing thoughts?
No, thank you all for joining and giving me this opportunity to learn from the text, because whenever I teach, I learn more. And whenever I have students, there are some very enlightened students here, such as Ishwarji. I learn a lot from every student, even by asking a question, forces me to rethink and reframe. And I would be very grateful if you took my class and taught me to and refreshed everything. Oh.